Okay, I'm going to start because I feel like it. You are here for the artist talks for the Dreadful Visitation, which is a show in Gagallery in Portland. Stacia Cabral is the gallery owner. But this show is going to be made up of work by Sally Jablonsky, Mikki Ulaszewski, Matthew Parker, Achilles Braziel, Ash Sanders Spross, and me, Adelaide Blair. Here are some slides showing what the actual show looks like. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are in a very weird time right now, and there's a lot happening, and a lot of it is really shitty. And I would like to acknowledge that this is happening, but also I think it is important for us to come together to create things, not just consume things. If we want to make a better world, we have to imagine that. And part of imagining that is participating in togetherness to make things, because that's how it gets done. And we need the practice, quite frankly. So let me read you the introduction to the show. In October 2022, Nature magazine published an article entitled Evolution of Immune Genes is Associated with the Black Death. The bubonic plague epidemic in the 14th century killed about half of Europe, and many survivors had a genetic variant that allowed them to mount a more robust immune response. This was great when there was an outbreak of bubonic plague, but not so often when there wasn't, because that same gene variant is present in current day sufferers of various autoimmune diseases. In this show, 6 artists address the Black Plague and the legacy left in their genes. So being able to mount a very strong immune response, turns out that's great for the plague, but not only is it bad in our everyday lives, it sucks because if you have COVID and you mount too much of a response, you will actually get COVID worse than you normally would, because the body just wants to shut all that down. So we have 6 different artists in the show. We have different autoimmune diseases. Nobody, even people who have the same one, nobody's experience is the same, but we do all experience what it's like to be in the medical system, what it's like to not feel good when other people think you look just fine. So even though we have our very distinct experiences, a lot of that kind of transfers from person to person. So talking from a curator's perspective, when I read that thing in Nature magazine, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I wonder if that's true. I wonder what I could do about that. And what happens in my brain particularly is that things sort of set in the back, and it requires other things to bounce off it before I can actually have a full idea of what I want to do. And in this case, the thing that was bouncing off it was twofold. One was COVID, and about how much misinformation and disinformation there was about how to cure COVID, how to keep yourself safe. And a lot of that felt really familiar to me while doing my research, because, when the plague was happening in the first couple rounds of it, people didn't know anything about medicine or how to prevent people from getting sick. So they would be like, yeah, just go hang out by the latrine because strong smells can get rid of the plague, which sounded a lot to me like, well, you want to get rid of COVID, take some ivermectin, like things that aren't real. And it sort of kind of hit me in the same way. And then the vaccine misinformation coming from RFK Jr. in our government right now, sort of all these things together sort of created this idea that we would all have something to say about this. I knew my specific thing, but also I was like, I wonder what other people have to say. These are the connections that I made. So how I did the show was I knew that people were going to be sick who wanted to participate, and that I had to build in time and other things to make this something that people who possibly could get seriously ill during the lead up to the show would actually have a buffer of time so that they could take time to be sick. There were people that I worked with, to just sort of like, well, you don't have to do a proposal right now because you're not feeling well, and we'll get you situated. And so rather than picking people whose work that I knew, I actually had an open call and people were submitting proposals. And it's kind of risky when you do that because you don't necessarily know these people. You don't know what kind of work is going to come. I feel like I got really lucky because I really love everything in this show, but also it's not really about the final show. It is about the process of thinking about the plague, the process of thinking about autoimmune diseases. It's about working with other people to sort of figure out how to best express that. And, like I said earlier, coming together to create something is an amazing thing to be able to do, of which oftentimes we will come together to watch TV or watch a movie or, things like that. But to actually create something that wasn't there before together is kind of more of what I think that we need. Also, I find other people to be difficult. It is not maybe my best skill set, but just because something is difficult does not mean that it's not important to do it. So the curatorial strategy on this was looking at the proposals and feeling these people could really do something, sort of talking back and forth to make sure that they stayed in the lane for the plague. But a lot of it was also just trust, to make sure, I had to trust people that they would do to their best. And even though it's not technically about the finished product, not the artist product, excuse me, but the finished show, I love everything in it. So I feel I got really lucky. One of the things I just want to address a little bit is because I am a professional sick person myself. Let me get a drink. I know what it's like to want to participate in these types of things and not being able to because there's not enough time, or, maybe it's difficult for me to go out in public. So maybe I might not be able to attend any of the shows. So having these things and thinking about these things and making space for people with lowered immune systems or whatever so that they could actually take place in this, and at the same time creating an opportunity that looks professional on a CV as opposed to uh, a lot of other opportunities for people. I mean, I'll be honest with you, a lot of it comes down to the name, like on what is considered a professional opportunity. But I really wanted this to look good and yet be able to support other artists um, who might not be having a ton of opportunities to participate in this. And one of the things that I'd like to take away from this is that these things that I have built in to this show, I'm going to take to other shows, because I'm trying to figure out how, as a curator and as a person who's putting on a show, how can I best care for the people I'm asking to participate? One of those ways is to pay them. So everybody who works with me gets paid in some way. It's not a tremendous amount, but it is an amount. Um, I think very long and hard about the schedule and how we can make room for people who maybe have children. So a lot of these are what I'm thinking about when I'm taking a show from the very beginning, which I actually thought about this in my last year in grad school and knew that this was going to happen, but I gave it at least a year before people actually, from when I started thinking about the show to when people were due to give me stuff. So I just want to say that I think these are a way of showing care to people, especially during a time when people are stressed out about possibly losing Medicaid or not being able to go into a public place because nobody's wearing a mask. I think these things carry over into other types of shows, and I think that is something that I'm going to try. So let's look at a few other pictures. This is just what the show looks like. It's a pretty small gallery, but I felt like everything, excuse me, worked really well. One of the artists today cannot be here because he's in grad school right now, and I'm sure he just doesn't have the resources. So I'm going to talk a little bit about his work. His work is this rock here. I would like to note that that is not a rock. Okay, let me talk. So I'm going to read Matthew's. This is by Matthew Deane Parker. I'm going to read his bio. He is a disabled multimedia artist working in sculpture, photography, and installation. Parker's artistic practice explores the nature of making bodies of work without a working body. He uses foam boulders to create physical barriers and spaces. He often reinterprets artistic movies through the lens, movements, not movies, through the lens of disability and mobility. Parker has recently shown work at Coffin Farm in Redmond, Specialist Seattle, and in his storage unit, which this is a picture of, 1A47 in Seattle. He earned a BFA in visual art from the Cornish School of the Arts. He is currently attending the School of the Art Institute in Chicago for his MFA. I'd like to note that there are no rocks in this picture. These are all made out of foam. Here is his piece in the show. It is titled Boundary Stone, and it is made of foam sculpture and PPE. His notes on this are, during the height of the deadly plague, also known as the Black Death, stone boulders were filled with vinegar and placed at or near parish boundaries. Vinegar was used as a disinfectant in the hope that the community could buy food and other goods without fear of contagion. So I really like this piece. When you see it in person, it actually does look like a rock. And in fact, some little kid got completely freaked out because she leaned against it and it moved. Yeah, so this is emblematic of Matthew's work. He's been making these rocks for a while. They talk a lot about the myth of Sisyphus pushing blocks, a boulder up the hill. And this piece I just found very interesting because I myself have a lowered immune system. So during the earlier parts of COVID, I wasn't really able to go out in public very much. And I had my own versions of things where people would come out to my house. So for me, this piece particularly resonated. And I'd say that all the pieces in the show resonate with me in a different way, simply because even though everybody has a different disease, it feels like a lot of our experiences were and still are the same. So I as an artist, am also in this show. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to go to the other people. I think, Ash, you were up next. Okay, so my name is Adelaide Blair. Many of you know me, many of you don't. I am a curator, I guess now, and an artist and a writer. And a lot of my work deals with disinformation, misinformation, how things can just slide a little bit and become something else, depending on context. I'm only going to briefly talk about a couple of my projects besides this. This is from a show called Dinosaur Illuminati Bloodbath, and it was in Portland last year. And these are AI-generated collages. So I had AI generate various images, and then I put them together. And the idea behind this was basically the potential for AI images to give evidence to conspiracy theories. So I created my own conspiracy theory about how the sea creatures rose from the oceans and became the Illuminati, and then they had a big battle with dinosaurs to see who would control the world. And the dinosaurs kind of lost, but now they're the lizard men, and the Illuminati is still controlling everything. So yeah, so it was meant to be a funny look at a not so funny possibility. Another project I recently worked on was Subversive Mathematics, which is a performance lecture about the outlawing of Venn diagrams in 1970s Argentina. So during Argentina in the 1970s, there was a military junta that killed 30,000 citizens. And a part of what was happening there was a denial of logic, and Venn diagrams were outlawed. And what was interesting to me was that the rhetoric of the time really seemed to echo what was being said here. And so I start swapping out pictures of Argentina with pictures of the Trump administration and various other people, just to make the point that these aren't that different of a situation. So for this particular show, I decided to deal with the snake oil, which is a term that people use for fake medicine. When you get a chronic illness, all of a sudden people start coming out of the woodwork to talk about how drinking celery juice will heal you, or becoming a vegan, or whatever, ivermectin, colloidal silver, and sort of thinking in terms of that with what the folk remedies were during the plague time. So kind of combining those two things, and gets a little bit escalated once RFK starts monkeying around with the vaccine boards and stuff. So this is my personal favorite one, because turn blue, good for you, I thought was a very catchy phrase. And also, you do actually turn blue if you take too much colloidal silver. So based in science. This one was the last one I did, and was directly after RFK Jr. started backtracking on vaccines, and kind of put off the next, started making it so that he was not promoting the measles vaccine, and also unpromoting, I guess would be the way to say it, of the COVID vaccine for children and pregnant women. And flagellation is just sort of like you have a whip and you whip yourself. And a lot of people believed if they were that holy, then they would not get the plague. So I just want to say that didn't work. I think we all heard a lot about ivermectin, because it does treat worms in cattle and swine, and maybe does not work so well on COVID. And then I think the last one I did was COVID got you down, try leeches. I'm just waiting for that one to make a comeback, because it seems like a lot of people believe in a lot of silly things. So it seemed as probable as ivermectin to use leeches. Okay, so that is the work that I have in this show. I think I like this work. I think that it is the basis for doing like bigger and better work, maybe, but I'm very satisfied with what I did in the show, but I like everybody's pieces. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And now I would invite Ash to share. And then after Ash will be Achilles. Rad, I can see it.
Okay. I am Ash Sanders Spross. I'm an illustrator, author, artist, and a DJ here in Portland. My current focus lately has been photography, writing, and illustrating. I have a BFA with an emphasis in printmaking and painting, so I like to tie that kind of into my illustrations, using like similar, mediums that my computer can now offer with different like adaptive technology. So this is kind of a full circle moment because I was diagnosed with Sjogren's like 7 years ago, and I put all my art supplies away, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I, Dax, come here. I when this show was doing call for work, my friend sent it over to me, and I was like, well, I guess this is a good time to work on something that's more than just, you know, things that people are asking me to make. So let me get into this. So this is some of the paintings I've done. I'm just gonna scroll kind of through it. My older work was how when you're a kid and you're diagnosed with things, how it sounds to you or see like how you see it as opposed to how it actually is. This one's actually in reference to being diagnosed with diabetes because they give you a stuffed animal and they're like, here, this is all the places you have to give shots, and you're like, faced with having to like, I don't know, digest that in its way. Here's some of my paintings, and other commercial work I do. And then I wrote and illustrated a children's book about the desert, and I'm working on one right now about the Pacific Northwest. So this is my work there's two pieces, this, and then it has a three-piece with it. This one is Isolation Vacation. It's pencil and chalk pastels to start drawing, and then I take those images, scan them, and then I start illustrating over them. So this is in reference to the beginning of COVID. It was cherry blossom season here in Portland, and everything was blooming crazy, and nature kind of like took over the city. And there was nobody outside except for to do like laps with their dogs, but like you didn't say hi to them because it was a weird time. So my book collection started growing, and that's me being sad under a window. So it's kind of a self-portrait. And then this one is my piece that there's three parts. I over COVID started drawing flowers from my garden and pressing them. So I used some references to those on the ones that I've already done myself. I just drew them up and I used the different herbs and everything that they stuffed the beak of the masks with, um, because they thought that could, rid of the plague. It was all through smell. So those are my two pieces for it. Being part of the show really, like seeing everybody's work together was super impactful. I loved this. Thank you for having me as part of it. Yeah.
Achilles, are you ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready to go. Please tell me that Firefox didn't crash. Okay. Is it there now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. My computer has a weird glitch problem, so I'm glad it's fine now. Anyways, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself and some of the things I do. My name is Achilles Braziel. I live in Richmond, Virginia, so I'm super excited that I got to like kind of I didn't get to go to Oregon, but all of my experiences with this is so fun, like being on the other side of the country and that kind of thing. But a lot of my work focuses in queerness, physicality, intimacy, all through like creatures, performance, and fabric, animation, and print. So like on the left, I have a picture of me in one of my performances where I'm a vampire cowboy, and I talk about how growing up in Oklahoma was interesting and that kind of thing. And then some of my zines are on the right. And a lot of these works definitely influenced what I did for the Dreadful Visitation. Please work for me. There we go. Okay, and so my piece is a sculpture that is of Saint Sebastian. And I was really interested in Saint Sebastian as a figure of like a community leader, especially in queerness, but also in religiosity. Excuse me if I mispronounced that. And the plague itself during that time when he was a plague saint, as he was prayed to for protection from the plague, and how he was a martyr, and the connections of his wounds looking like the bubonic plague, like things on his body, and those those like embodiments of him, I would say. I didn't want to make something completely literal of just like his body on the wall or something like that. So I just wanted to take the arm and the torso, as I felt those were two of the most interesting aspects or most important aspects of those things. I'm clicking forward. There we go. And so on his body, I have like these red little patches of of the buboes and those kinds of things on the arm and down the body. And a lot of his project was focusing on fabric as a connection between uh, draping bodies and covering them, but also sharing space and how you can hold history and build community through fabric. A lot of my inspiration came from the AIDS quilt specifically, as Saint Sebastian was extremely important, like artistically and in a community sense during that time as well. So I have some examples of some of the things I referenced off of the quilt directly, uh, like with the bird up here on the top right of the torso. And then it came to me in more abstract ways too, like on the left here, just like the flow of that I was interested in. And so I put that like on the bottom of the torso with like the brown fabrics and the cream and just a lot of like the lines and the overlapping and just like the holding of hands in that kind of sense. And then, of course, I had the arrow, which also connected to the plague, as they believed the plague traveled through the air and that kind of thing, like flight and those ideas. And then I had the star of forever remember me as loving you onto the body where the arrow pierced him. A lot of this was cutting down my ideas. I still think I have a few too many probably, but Adelaide was very helpful in me figuring out and like coalescing a lot of the ideas of queerness and disability and the idea of like divine punishment, but then also like homoeroticism. Like there's just so much in Saint Sebastian that he's very overwhelming. And so I definitely want to continue thinking about him and making pieces about him and just thinking about like my own personal disability through him and how I think about religion and just I don't know. It's he made me think about how people can be figureheads and like both like deified but also real people and they're worshipped, but he was also like I don't know. It's like a person versus a god and all these interesting things all tied up in him. I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, so much fun. I'm glad he made it over there safely. I was worried about that. But yeah, I think that's all I had to say about that.
Sally, I believe that it is your turn next.
Hello.
Hello.
Might have an echo situation. Oh, good. Okay. Milo's in here on a different screen, also attending the talk. Hi, everybody. I wrote some stuff down because when I start talking about art, I have in my ideas, I have a lot of ideas and I just ramble around. So I'm just going to read.
Do you have an image to share with us?
Oh, I do. Yeah. I made a slideshow of 2 things. Thanks, Heidi. Okay. And then slideshow. Okay. So, well, this is in the way. There we go. I made a painting that I named For Truth or Terror, or Fantasy Rats, or Magical Realism. And this is a close-up from that painting. And it's oil on canvas and 3 feet square. And then here's the full one. And I'll move this back over to the side now, if I can. Okay. So I make art because I'm just compelled to, like all of you are. And I'm moved by the process of doing it. But I also have come to find that making and ruminating over these oil paintings that I've been making is a way for me to understand reality in a new and sometimes deeper way than I had before. When I was making this painting, and as I was making it and before I made it, I did a bunch of research that spanned from the Black Plague to pogroms to rat physiology to lab rat testing to poisonous and medicinal plants. And that was a lot. And what I've distilled about possible meanings of this painting, I think is best. I wrote it down in my artist statement that went along with the painting. So I'm going to read that to you. And then I'll say a little bit more after that also. So here it is. I'm interested in how the myth of rats spreading the plague is a window into the human inclination to propagate and live within fantasies of all kinds. On my journey of having autoimmune illnesses, I have encountered a variety of myths which have clouded my access to diagnosis, treatment, and understanding. The myths are different now than they were in 1347, but reality is still veiled by the same fantasy spinning methods. In this painting, if the rats are a group of rare albinos, each is its own version of a truth. Maybe the rats are fantasies which obscure true understanding. Or, if these are lab rats, maybe they have escaped and are living a strange, new, free life that could only be improvised through their ability to think fantastically. I feel a kinship to rats because of the stigmatization of being diseased, and I also feel another layer of connection to these rats because they could be lab rats, and that's because I've come to experience the world of medicine as an experiment on my body. Maybe this painting is a model for a society which upholds truths. Each of the rats, instead of being a vessel which holds human superstition, is instead a vehicle for searching out an objective truth. Each of them has the power to show something real about existence. Maybe, in order to live fully and freely within a society that doesn't often include sick bodies, I became a fantasy rat. So that's where I kind of ended with the, that's where I ended the artist statement. And I've been thinking about, like, what does it mean to me to, like, identify as a fantasy rat, sort of? So this idea of being a fantasy rat, I think, relates to Johanna Hedva's sick woman theory, in which Hedva explains, and here's a quote from their essay, that, and if you aren't familiar with this theory, here's a little bit about it, that sick woman theory is about and for, and these are Hedva's words, those who are faced with their vulnerability and unbearable fragility every day, and so have to fight for their experience to not only be honored, but first made visible. Hedva then quotes Audre Lorde, and saying that the theory is for those who were never meant to survive, because this world was built against their survival, and it is the world that needs fixing. So Hedva extends the idea of the sick woman to be, and this is again in their words, an identity and body that can belong to anyone denied the privilege of existence, or the cruelly optimistic promise of such an existence, of white, straight, healthy, neurotypical, upper and middle class, cis and able-bodied man who makes his home in a wealthy country, who has never not had health insurance, and whose importance to society is everywhere recognized and made explicit by that society, whose importance and care dominates that society at the expense of everyone else. The sick woman is anyone who does not have this guarantee of care. So, Hedva speaks about a radical kinship and a politics of care, and I'm speaking to what the experience of being a sicko, which is what I like to say, does to one's being. So I propose that to be a fantasy rat is to live in the world as an outsider, and maybe one that's diseased, and with all the cultural implications of having a diseased body. And that experience creates an opportunity to see the world and our experiences in a creative way. It's a way that feels fantastical in contrast with the ways society shapes our relationship to and with our bodies, but it's a necessary way. It's a way for survival, and for feeling the magic of reality, and a way to see beyond the brokenness. I'm making myself cry. Oh my god. It's a wait, I can't say it. Carry on. It's a way to see beyond the brokenness of the world. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you, Sally. That was really sweet and amazing. And I heart you. I heart everybody on Zoom right now, but specifically you at this moment. Okay, Mikki. Mikki is our final presenter today, and they are rad.
So I'm Mikki Ulaszewski. I am based in Seattle, Washington. I am a queer mixed media artist, painting, sculptures, got back into sewing, kind of do basically anything and everything I can get my hands on. So little background work. This is kind of the format. I like to do paintings and pull a lot of stuff into it. This is from my solo show about coming out as a trans person and like dealing with that in my own head. A few other pieces that I've done, a little kind of Baba Yaga house. I did a lot of kind of street art photo with these cans that I pulled together, and then another piece from my solo show from a few years ago. But for this specific piece, for this show, when it was focusing on autoimmune, I actually ended up with an autoimmune diagnosis before COVID started. Not to mention growing up, I was constantly sick, always in the hospital. I was allergic to like everything and anything. My mother has many a horror story of running me to the emergency room while my face swelled up. So like I just very have always kind of been sitting in this I am always sick place. So these are actually some pieces that were for the online portion of the show to showcase a hand painting, as well as some pill bottles that I filled with resin and actually color dye and old pills to kind of talk through and work through my own piece. But then for the larger piece, I really wanted to look at kind of, because I've been in this place of like illness my whole life, is looking at why. And we kind of hit a point as humans where regardless of what beliefs you have or what your faith or your spirituality is, you can hit a point where you're just kind of like staring up and you're like, why? Where is my answer? Where is the thing? Who is doing this? How can I ask for help? So my big piece was actually to make an altar piece like they would have at churches where you don't know what else to do for your family member because they're telling you, they'll get better if we put leeches all over them. So you go and you light a candle in the church and you say your prayers. So that was really my big focus. So first, what you're seeing on the screen, I did votive candles that were both connected to the saints with the Black Plague. So Saint Sebastian was one I also picked, as well as Saint Roche, and did kind of traditional votive pieces for them. But then also did these other votive candles that were things that helped me, or kind of more technology pieces. So like when I got diagnosed, social media was huge because I actually, the rare condition I had, I found a whole community by going to social media where we could talk to each other and figure out, well, this doctor said this, but this doctor said this, what's working for you? At the time I could only eat buttered toast, so the little things. And then besides the votives, I made a huge piece. So it's a full stand-up altarpiece that's got a Madonna in the middle, and then instead of little cherubs like some of them, I ended up and opted to paint my cats because they were like my little angels in bed. And then the whole piece, I actually invited people to go up and then pick up these tiny little candles that they could turn on in place and then recite the brand new Hail prayer I wrote and redid an entire Hail Mary prayer so that way it was more modern but also non-gendered and non-religious in the best way I could do it, where it was more just a statement of what are we looking for. So yeah, that's really that's all my piece. That's what I got. Yeah.
Thank you, Mikki. Before I open things up for questions, I would just like to encourage all of you to do a group project, put on a show, do a zine. I honestly feel right now that the more we can connect with other people, uh, the better we are, because social media wants us to pay attention to it and not each other. And I do something weird together, even if it's just coming together and having a potluck. Um, it's time that we sort of claimed our time because there's so much going on right now. And if we don't take care of each other and if we don't do things together, I think it's going to be easier to even break us further apart. So, yes. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, oh, Ron has nice things. Okay, Ron has a question for Sally. I love hi, Sally. Thanks for your presentation. I love your painting deeply and find myself having goosebumps from the rat that formed from star sharps. Could you talk about that more, please? Turn on you're muted, Sally.
Oh, that specific rat? Is that what you're wondering about?
Yeah, the rat form. Yes.
Um, I was trying to think about how to, I don't know, what's it called? Distort? That's not the right word. I guess distort what a rat could look like, but make it fun and feel fantastical and also like a little bit Lisa Frankish. And yeah, I don't have that much to say about that rat, I guess, but thank you.
Does anybody else have a question? I can't see anything. Oh, Melissa asked, how was the curation process in the gallery? What were the main concerns? So this is actually an interesting point. So you don't know what you've got until you've got it all together. And to be honest, if I could take something out, it would actually be my own work because it feels very different than everything else. We kind of spaced the advertisements out through the pieces so they weren't together. Yeah, so yeah, I like the pieces. I think they are a good start to something else. Um, they did teach me how to make, because usually I can only do screen prints that are like 11 by 15, but these are 22 by 15. So I worked on piecing them together. So there was a lot of good things that came out of them, but I think I would do them differently knowing what I know the show looks like now. But I didn't when I did them. So that's always the risk. Um, oh, thank you, Io. Io says, for not knowing ahead of time, the space looks great with everything hung up. Just everything just fits right. Yes, I feel like it does look good, but of course, I'm always going to be the most critical of my own work because that's how we go. Because a lot of us artists are not megalomaniacs. We live in the self-doubt town. Um, so, any other questions? You can write it, or you can raise your hand, or just speak out. I'm like dancing in my chair. Yes, so I just, once again, I would like to thank everybody who saw the show, who's going to come to see the show, who came today, especially Ash, Matthew, Mikki, Sally, and Achilles. It's been so much fun to work with everybody, and I learned a lot about putting on a show together, because up until this point, I have primarily been a curator in the terms of doing books. And so this was my first show, and I learned a lot about it. And I'm just very happy to have met such wonderful people. So, because there were people, most everybody, I think Sally was the only one that I knew ahead of time. So I just want to say thank you, and make group projects, you guys. Anybody else have anything to say?
Give a shout out to the photographer. I don't know.
Oh, yes.
Turned out great.
He, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm Aaron Wessel. If you put in the words Portland art documentation, his company comes up, and his first name is Aaron, and I can't believe I'm spacing. But he did a really good job, was very easy to contact, was very professional. Highly recommended, 2 thumbs up. And I'm just really grateful. The greatest thing that you can give to another artist is your attention. And I appreciate all of you guys. So thank you very much for coming.